Okay, so let's get started with professionalism. This is standard number 1. And the first subpart we're going to look at is knowledge of the law. So what we're going to do is review all of the subparts, A, B, C, D, etc. And we'll just sort of make some notes about those different sections. Now, obviously, you can go and read the whole section in the CFA handbook, and that's a nice large read of 200 odd pages. So we're going to pick out what we see as the most important things for you to try and remember, but also to apply to your professional life as well. So dealing with standard 1A and knowledge of the law. So this is our requirement that we understand the laws that we fall under and we make sure that we're adhering to them. Now that can be the laws of the land and the country that we are, that could be the laws of your company, or it could be the laws or the standards set out by this code of ethics as well. So the first point that we would make on this section is that if there is a suspected violation, that your responsibility is to notify your supervisor or the compliance department if that's available in the company that you work for. It is not a requirement for you to notify the regulator of a suspected violation of laws, code, etc. And you'll find that there can be some trick questions around this in these exams where they'll say, you suspect that there is a violation, what should you do? Or, what should the person do that they're talking about? And one of the options will be go talk to the SEC or go talk to the country's regulator or something like that. And no, that's not. I mean, the regulators have got enough on their plate without every suspected violation coming across their desk. And so very important that you make that distinction. But any suspected violation, you should be in a firm where there is a compliance officer who is there to receive those requests and that information, and will make sure that that gets dealt with. The next thing that we need to do, according to knowledge of the law, is be prepared to disassociate from any violations. So, for instance, if you're working in a firm, and let's just say you're a charter holder, no one else is in the firm is a charter holder, they're doing some things which are a little bit suspect, and you're thinking, hang on, this is in breach of the code, may not be breaking the law, but is in breach of the code of ethics. You then have an obligation to disassociate. Now, hopefully you can disassociate by saying, look, I can't put my name to this research paper because of these reasons. Maybe it's, that's enough, and your employer is okay with that. Sometimes though, in, obviously maybe not such a pleasant workplace, but you will get yourself in trouble saying that, and you'll find that you actually need to resign. So you have to be willing to resign if you are put in a position where you're compromising either the law of the land or the law of the country, or the rules and ethics as stipulated by these standards. The final part of this is that when we have a situation where the laws of the land and the code of ethics and maybe the bylaws of your company that you're working for, where there is a difference of opinion, the requirement for those who are adopting the code of ethics is that we abide by the stricter of that group of different laws. So for instance, if you're living in a country where insider trading is not illegal, can you do insider trading? Well, the answer is no, because the code of ethics here says that we are not allowed to do that. And so we have to abide by whichever one is the most strict. If there was another one where, for instance, accepting gifts is okay in some circumstances in the code of ethics, but if your country had a rule that anybody working in finance is completely illegal to accept a gift, well, you'd have to abide by the stricter rule there. So often you'll see a question along those lines where it's talking about different countries' laws. What should the candidate or the candidate do in that situation? And it is always going to be abide by whichever is stricter. So an example question here, we have Barb Dwyer, is a part of an acquisition team for a private equity fund. She has a colleague preparing a research report on Target Company, a firm that may soon be acquired by the fund. Based on conversations with other colleagues, Ms. Dwyer suspects that material non-public information was used to prepare a research report. Obviously, we can't do that. Ms. Dwyer did not participate in the preparation of the research report in any way and does not have access to its contents. According to the standards of practice, which of the following would be Ms. Dwyer's best action? So A, as she did not participate in the wrongdoing, she doesn't have to do anything. B, she should inform her compliance officer of the situation before taking further action. Or C, she should dissociate from the wrongdoing, including possibly even resigning. Now, see, this is a little tricky one because you would think that the answer would be C, that she should completely dissociate and threaten to resign or resign if it's not resolved. But she's not part of the process making it. Her name's not on it. There is the obligation for her to resign isn't there because she's not being forced to participate in any sort of wrong behaviour. B is the correct answer there, that she should inform her compliance officer, and it's then up to the compliance officer to fulfil their fiduciary obligations in their role as well. All right, so moving on to standard 1B, which is independence and objectivity. So this is all about how we maintain our independence and objectivity as analysts, as traders, etc. We need to make sure that we're not allowing anything to sway our professional opinion about the markets, about a recommendation, what's best for a client, etc. So we'll just run through some hit points here. Modest gifts are okay, but it's best to pay for your own expenses if practical. We'll talk more about gifts as well later, and there are a lot of questions about that, but remember, modest gifts are okay. The other requirement there is that it can't be a material large gift, which is going to influence you, and your employer needs to be aware of it. Cannot promise favourable recommendations. So that is a big red flag. You can't say to a company that you're doing a rating on that you're going to give them a great recommendation if they do XYZ for you. Avoid investment banking conflict, sales target pressures. You know, this is really big in the 80s and the 90s, where we had lots of pressure to sell shares on companies that were quite questionable. And so the analysts were being induced through sales targets and incentives to sell as much as possible. And so again, that's now sort of seen as, okay, that's not great. It's not in the client's best interest. It affects your independence and objectivity. Resist pressure to issue favourable recommendations. Again, that's a variation of what we've already talked about. Material gifts from third parties should be rejected. The size, it's material, it's so big you could never have afforded it on your own, and it's a gift that really that shouldn't be accepted. Gifts from clients are okay, must be disclosed to the employer. Fees for research should not be linked to investment levels. So if you're doing research, for a company, for clients, etc., what you say in your research and the fees that are charged, etc., should not be linked at all to how people invest. As in, I'll give you a discount if you invest more, or it depends exactly on how that relationship works. But your research and your opinions should be your research and opinions no matter what. If you're making $1, if you're making $1 million from it, that your research shouldn't change based on the fees or the investment levels or anything like that. Research should consider all scenarios, not just historical norms. This is very important for us as technical analysts when we're looking at charts and we're coming up with recommendations or trading signals. We've got to make sure that we're not just looking at the ideal scenario for our thesis, but we're actually looking at a wide variety of different market phases, etc. So let's look at a question here. According to the CFA Institute Standards of Professional Conduct, which of the following is least likely a compliance procedure for Standard 1B, independence and objectivity? So this is a different one. So what about this is something that, when you see a question like this, there's going to be a number of suggestions, a number of procedures. Which one of these doesn't relate to this standard of independence and objectivity? So restricts special cost arrangements related to travel. Well, we've already talked about that. So yeah, we do want to restrict those. So that's definitely related to this because it can affect our independence. We've got B, maintain files to support investment recommendation. Well, that's not really part of this one, but always best to check the other two answers. C, limit gifts to token items only. Yep, that's to do with this section. D, create a restricted list so that the firm disseminates only factual information about a controversial company. Yes, that's something to do with objectivity as well. And so the answer there is B. I forget which standard, we haven't gotten there yet, but that is covered under, I think it's our research in Standard 5. All right, moving on to Standard 1C, misrepresentation. So again, pretty clear here. Don't use someone else's material and claim it as your own. So we've got to disclose when research is issuer paid. So this is a little bit of a variation. This is the situation where company ABC is employing you and paying you to do research on them and on their stock. If that's the case, they're the issuer of the stock. So if you were doing research on that, you would have to disclose that. Otherwise, again, your research would be misrepresenting, your opinions, because there is an element of not being objective. So this can almost look like it's in contradiction to Standard 1B of independence. But again, there are always going to be times where somebody who's paying the bills, it could be deemed as a conflict of interest, and we cover that in Standard 6 a little bit more too. But when it comes to misrepresentation, just make sure you disclose that type of situation. Errors are not a breach. So if you're doing a research report and you've done a calculation, be it a technical calculation or a valuation of some sort, and you say company ABC is a strong buy because these values are at that level, and you realize after that was a mistake. Now, if you said nothing, then that would be a breach. So putting a correction out is fine, but as I said, an error is not a breach because your error may have enticed people to trade and to act or to invest in that company. And so the reason why this is raised here is that it's possible for an unscrupulous analyst to put out an error on purpose, entice people to act and benefit from that, and then put out or maybe not even say it. And if the regulator comes, say, oh, sorry, that was a mistake. It was a copying error between my research and the report or something like that. So errors in themselves aren't a breach, but if you fail to correct it, then that would be a breach. Original authors must be credited. Failure to do so is plagiarism. We've got a couple of here about plagiarism. Copying verbatim any material without acknowledgement is plagiarism. Always cite where you get your data from. Nobody minds if we are putting together, we're professionals. We all have learnt from multiple sources, and we always should be continuing to learn and read multiple sources. No one minds if it's like, this is what Tom Dorsey says in his paper on NASDAQ. Those sorts of things are fine to do. Just make sure you cite it. It's when someone claims that the knowledge is their own, rather than giving acknowledgement, that you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. All right, so let's have a look at a question here. Which of the following would be permissible under Standard 1C, misrepresentation? A, attributing research to investment experts. Well, no, because that's too vague. You've got to cite where the research came from. B, using excerpts from a report prepared by a well-known outside research firm without acknowledgement. No, again, we have to give acknowledgement of where we got that report from. C, including a graph showing the Fed's discount rates over the previous 12 months in a report that goes to clients. Well, that one's okay. The answer's a little bit silent there on did they cite the chart, where the chart came from. So far I'd be saying C looks okay, but I'd want to check D. D, reporting statistics prepared by an outside firm, identifying the source, but omitting the caveats and qualifying statements. Well, that one is obviously misrepresenting the statistics. So essentially what we would be doing is taking, according to research company DEF, the stock market should be rising by 20%. Now, they may have some caveats in their report that says if the Fed keeps rates at a low, and if this. So if we just take the top level number, don't mention the caveats, then that would be a breach of misrepresentation as well. So C is our answer in this case. Standard 1D, misconduct. So there's a couple of clear cases here. Intoxication at work is a breach. It's sort of leads to incompetence. It's obvious. Altering expense claims is a breach. That's fraud. Manipulating situations for personal benefit is a breach. It's deceit. Acts of civil disobedience in support of personal beliefs are not a breach. Now, this one's interesting because you could be forgiven for thinking that were I to get arrested for a protest and that would be unprofessional, it would be misconduct. Well, not really, because so long as it's not affecting your work and not affecting your professionalism in your role, we can have beliefs about things that are important to us. And we may get arrested for that, possibly, but that is not a breach of the code of ethics. And so do watch out for questions like that coming through. Continuing to pursue what was suspected of being unethical activity. So this is a case where you may think something that you're doing could be unethical, but you're not really sure. If you just continue to do that, even though you're thinking that way, that would be a breach. Now, that would be difficult to prove, but nevertheless, the best practice here is to say, let's go talk to the compliance department and ask them about this activity and ask them to make a ruling. Now, always do that in writing so that you have the written confirmation that, hey, I took it to compliance. Compliance said it was okay, so I continued doing it. So a question here, which of the following standards admonishes members and candidates against professional dishonesty, fraud and deceit, committing any act that reflects adversely on their professional reputation, integrity or competence? And so we have answer A, Standard 1A, knowledge of the law, or Standard 1B, independence and objectivity, Standard 1C, misrepresentation, Standard 1D, misconduct. So hopefully you can see that that is misconduct there. Okay, Standard 1E, competence. So we must act with competence to fulfill our professional responsibilities. It's kind of like we've got to have the training. We've got to make sure that we are properly trained for the job that we're doing and that we're not guessing things, we're not assuming things, we're finding out about it and doing proper due diligence and we have the competence to do that due diligence when we're advising clients, etc. We must continue to improve professional competence to meet requirements and responsibilities. This one, it doesn't mean that we have to engage in any specific course, and that's what makes this one a little bit hard, because they're not specifying that you must do your CFA or you must do your CMT if you want to talk about technicals or anything like that. But there is this expectation that if there is a expectation or a standard of competence that you should have to be able to give advice or do research in a certain area, that you will go out and get that qualification, etc. So instead, what they're basically asking is that we need to meet the standards required by our employer and by our industry whenever we're doing any sort of function in the financial realm. Okay, so let's go and look at an example question here on this concept. So Just In Case CMT is a financial planner for over 150 retail investors. Based on investment objectives, financial circumstances and risk tolerance of 40 of his clients, he suggests that they purchase life insurance products from Voucher Safe Insurance Company. What can go wrong? Case researched Voucher Safe and recommended it because it has a high credit rating, strong financials and a decade-long history of providing affordable, safe insurance products. Within 18 months, as a result of previously unknown financial impropriety and fraud by the company's chief financial officer, Voucher Safe goes bankrupt and the insurance contracts for thousands of policyholders become worthless. Which of the following is correct according to Standard 1E? Case was incompetent in recommending Voucher Safe policies because Case relied on a high credit rating. Well, we can knock that one out, because really, if a credit rating, it's their responsibility as well to be investigating these sorts of companies, insurance companies, etc., and creating a credit rating based on numbers of metrics. And these credit ratings are supposed to be giving a rating so that we don't have to go and do all of that work again. And so they're doing that work for us. B, Case was incompetent in recommending Voucher Safe's policies because Case was not a life insurance specialist. That's partially true. Obviously, he's not a life insurance specialist, but within the realms of financial advice, etc., again, we can rely on the credit ratings as a form of due diligence. And so that doesn't really become really much of an issue here either. So C, Case was incompetent recommending Voucher Safe policies because the insurance contracts became worthless. Well, that's like saying that if he advised on a trade and the trade went bad, then he was incompetent. That's not what this standard is saying. We're always looking at probabilities. We're always looking at trades. They have a probability of winning. They have a probability of losing. The outcome doesn't determine whether the advisor was competent or not. And then D, Case showed competence by examining the client's risk profile and suggesting a policy that had industry-approved ratings. And so D is the answer in this case. Again, very important that we have a very clear distinction that it's not the results that matter, but it's that we are training ourselves to be able to give advice, to be able to give recommendations, to be able to analyse charts, whatever it is their role is within finance. All right, so that is Standard 1, professionalism. Very important that we present ourselves professionally to our clients and colleagues and non-charter holders as well. So we'll continue on with Standard 2, which is all about the markets in the next video.